Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by one solo, super awesome co-host,
Laura Nash. Hello, fellow reader.
Hello, Laura. I am glad to have you here. We are returning to talk more about the games of IFComp 2024. As you can see, we're down a couple of co-hosts. There have been some scheduling conflicts, so we don't have quite as many as we would normally have of the games to talk about, but we have a handful of things and thought it might be good to get together and talk about some of the things we've been playing in IFComp 2024. I've been continuing to have fun with IFComp 2024. A lot of good stuff in the comp this year. We've had some really nice listeners who've been playing along with us and recommending stuff to check out on the Discord. And the main game that I spent the most time with this week was I played exclusively because of a recommendation on the Discord. So thanks very much to our patrons there. This is not a game I probably would have played under normal circumstances, partly because I don't... There's always a little bit, there's always one or two like very sexy games in the comp. This is not a sexy game. That makes it sound a little I mean, I guess it could be, depending on your perspective. It might be a sexy game, but I wouldn't say this is a very explicit game. Folks who scrolled the comp.
And there is a very big difference between a sexy game and an explicit game in my book. Just as there is a very big difference between a sexy movie and an explicit movie.
Yes. I will say this is probably both in a way.
Right.
So I am talking about, let me make sure I get the title first. So this is a game called Latex, Leather, Lipstick, Love, Lust, which is the main title, but it's also one of these games that has, the longer extended cut of the title. This is the full title. Latex, Leather, Lipstick, Love, Lust, or Sextuple L. And side note here from Raygan, you may wonder where that additional L is, because that's only 5 L's. Well, listener, it's explained in the next part of the title, or the Dysonic Ballad of a Guy Named L. So, of course, yes, Sextuple L, because all of those plus L is the main character. Or the Tender Requiem of a Girl Named L star, 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 star. Dead names in this are presented asterisked out. Or some tranny F-slur goes to a kink club, which is the pithy version of basically the plot summary of the first act of this game. This is an extremely long game for this sort of thing. It is an entirely choice-based, narrative. This is a sort of, I don't know if I want to necessarily call this like a coming of age story, because the main character is like in their mid 20s, but it has a little bit of that feel. This is a story.
It's a delayed coming of age story.
Exactly.
Yes.
In fact, this is something they comment on somewhat in the story of like so I've read a lot of trans narratives, and I think this is a really good one. And it's in part because it's not the same story that I've read 100 times. Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably an exaggeration, but certainly more than once. This is a really interesting story about the main character is a trans man named L, just the letter L. That's his whole name, and lives in London. And he is at a point in his life where he sort of seems to have lost almost all connection to other IRL people. So all of his relationships that he seems to me like a pretty lonely guy. He's pretty much lost all relationships with in-person people after his transition and COVID and leaving college. And he's gotten a master's in linguistics, but doesn't have a job and is just sort of like drifting a little bit and looking for like what's next in his life, thinking about maybe moving home with his parents, but his parents aren't fully on board with his identity, and that sounds like very overwhelming for him. The game basically begins with him with a sort of a real failure of he's trying desperately, it seems like, to try to find some in-person connection with someone, and he attempts going to a latex themed fetish bar or fetish club.
Okay.
And it does not go particularly well. This is listed, by the way, as a transgressive, mature, quote, comedy. The comedy is in quotation marks. I wouldn't necessarily have thought of this as a comedy necessarily, although it does has many very funny bits. It actually, I think the thing that really stands out to me about this work is the writing is really, like, I really connected with the writing. The characters are great. The dialogue is great. It feels really naturalistic. I'll talk about some of the elements, like it's got a lot of very online stuff because, like I mentioned, Elle is like really disconnected from human connection, and it has been subsisting on bad internet friendships as like his only connection, and all of that stuff really works here. But he goes to this sex club. It doesn't turn out particularly well. He leaves, and at the bus stop on the way home, he meets somebody else who is also leaving the sex club, Valentine, sort of the other main character of this story, who is a man who just seems to have it all together. He's attractive. I hope I'm not spoiling anything here. I don't think this is, but I think it's relevant here. This Elle sort of realizes that Valentine is like almost sort of like what he wants to be. Valentine is a trans man who's sort of farther into his transition, more connected with his community, both through this fetish club and just with other trans people in general, more confident, has a job, has an apartment, just in general, like seems almost ludicrously like above Elle, in his mind. And yet they hit it off with this really genuine friendship. I will also, warning to the listener, this is a game about going to a sex club and meeting someone. It is also a game about things that happen in the sex club. And so this is it's certainly not a porn game. It's not a game that like dwells exclusively on sex, but there's an extremely plot relevant, very incredibly well described sex scene that goes on quite a long time. It's about basically one of the 5 acts of this game is one lengthy sex scene, essentially. And so I just do want to sort of prepare folks for that. And the game tries its best to do that as well. I think it's actually like really well written and incredibly plot, it earns it. Mm-hmm. It's not, throwing it out there for prurient purposes, unless you're into that. Hey, whatever, cool. If you are, maybe this game is extra good for you. It was not, that's aspect of it. Hey, I'm coming at it as a straight cis white, pretty boring married dude with 3 kids. I really did still connect with this, maybe not specifically that aspect of it so much, but even that element of the story, it was like is driving story and character forward through those incredibly graphic sex scene. I'll give you just a little bit of a warning here. The game gives you a very lengthy list of its themes, divided in 2. So its trigger warnings, I suppose, page is listed as perversions, and the list of perversions includes BDSM, M/M, FM/M, T4T. So these are the abbreviations of the types of pairings that are involved. Leather plus latex, fellatio, fingering, gags, bondage, bootlicking, and wire play. But also, in the less sexy column, suicide ideation and intention, self-harm, transphobia, homophobia, racism, fatphobia, ableism, autism, slurs, internalized bigotry, death threats, gaslighting, vomiting, bodily fluid /urine/blood, infections, online drama /discourse. So that's the list.
Infections. Wow. Truly yes. Everything. Wow.
It's got it all. It's so compellingly written. It was a real page turner for me. And page turner is a bit of the wrong word, because this is one of those games that does a click per line. This is a controversial presentation style in interactive fiction. Some people just, if they pick up a game where you have to click to advance the text multiple times per page, basically click to advance.
Some people are out on that automatically.
Some people are out instantaneously. Yeah. This game, I think, really earns it. One of the things that this game does is it's constantly showing, Elle is stuck at this point in his life where he is trapped in between feeling, incapable of connection with, in-person humans, and having his online connections, which are mostly Americans that he knows through Discord and Tumblr, just sort of falling apart. And one of the things that this does really, really well is that it's constantly going between those 2 modes. And when it's in the L is scrolling his Tumblr dashboard, or L is checking in on his, queer community Discord. The Discord looks like Discord. You're scrolling through text that looks like Discord. And the reason I brought that up when I was talking about the clicking thing is like, I think that sort of plays into it. Like you get that feeling of like messages popping up in a Discord chat, click, 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 click. And the Tumblr stuff, the Discord stuff, it felt very true to life. There's some like, I'm not a Tumblr guy, but like it really focused, the game focused on a few different themes, obviously, but one of the things that it really was sort of focusing on was this feeling of like the Tumblr side of this was a bunch of infighting about like litigating identities. People, there's one constant thread throughout it where there's a fight happening on, in real time on his Tumblr dashboard between people who think that bi lesbian is a valid identity and people who think that bi lesbian is like an op by TERFs, like that this is a phrase invented by TERFs. I actually don't know anything about that particular conflict. I don't know the right of it. I don't know if L really does either. And I think he kind of comes down on, eventually the story seems to kind of come down on the element of like, go touch grass. This is a a Tumblr conversation and he's better off without it. But it's that sort of like, online discourse. And then he's got this Discord of where he's got this quote unquote best friend who is just like a really manipulative weirdo. And that character is really vividly painted, but also incredibly uncomfortable to interact with. And it has this feeling of like, why does he keep this person in his life, or even like the minimal amount of in his life that is like existing as a notification on his phone? And this is the story of him kind of like coming to terms with like, what is he doing with this is the only connection he has, but he needs to get rid of it. Really great stuff. I have a couple of things like quotes that I copied out of this because like I said, this has like amazing writing. Yeah. I thought it has really, really strong writing. Some of it is just like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, real quick before you get into the quotes, you mentioned that this has some Discord styling. What does the game look like? Is it mostly plain text and then the online stuff is separate? You mentioned the click by click, but I'm just curious what it looks like.
Sure. So when he's not scrolling his phone, it looks and behaves. I actually don't know for sure what tech this is running on, but it looks and behaves like a lot of like Twine games or things like that. You've got a central column of text. It's usually white on a black background. And there's a kind of a frame on the sides where it does have these sort of low resolution images of scenes, to give you a little bit of flavor of whatever room you're in, basically. Cool. So if he's, lying in the bathroom suffering from an infection,
less cool.
Well, you can see a toilet in the background.
Sure.
If you're in the sex club, it's all red and there's like cool lights or something.
So there's cues to help you.
Yes.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. But it is all basically just text. It does some nice stuff. Like, he has a sort of an inner dialogue with himself. And so sometimes it kind of has this like, italic text that's his like, inner monologue with himself, things like that. But then when he's on his phone, it switches up to looking identical. It's using the same font and color scheme and like emojis and styling of Discord, or it has these like very realistic looking, at least to me as a non-Tumblr user, Tumblr dashboard posts with that very confusing. I've always found Tumblr is like super, super confusing because everyone's like, quote unquote, like, I forget what the word they use on Tumblr, but when you do like a reply to somebody and you're like, it basically reposts like, yeah, like you have these things where somebody has a post, but it includes like 7 previous posts.
Yeah.
Because it does that a lot. So, but it all looked and worked like really, really well. One side note about the Discord thing, I just have to shout out this is a small thing, but like one of my absolute favorite things this does. This is he's in this Discord. They're constantly having these like little infighting conversations that he's being asked to participate in. And in the Discord, there's this one character whose screen name is TF141, who never speaks apart from dropping YouTube links into the chat. And all of the YouTube links are the most deranged shit. At first, I thought they weren't real links, so I couldn't click on them. And when I realized that they were, I started clicking on every single one, man, because they all link. I don't know how the author of this found these videos, but they're all links to the most like bizarre 5-view, 15-year-old YouTube videos. Like one of them was like a binaural hypno music to make you win the lottery.
Oh man, you've destroyed your algorithm. Enjoy that.
I love it, man. Or like a gameplay video from some child recording the screen of some kind of Paper Dolls game while they play the Avril Lavigne song Skater Boy in the background and like make their character dance to it.
Oh.
Like stuff like that, man. It was I loved it, and every time that person posted, and there was a payoff to that character too towards the end. It was art, man. I was very, very pleased with that. But anyway, long story short, it tells a really great story. I have a couple of quick quotes to read from it. I know I'm kind of going on, but this was probably
definitely
the really the only thing that I really put a lot of time into, because this is a long game for one of these. Like, this is novella length. It took me over 4 hours to play through all of it. But I was very absorbed in it the entire time. There's one motif that just had me like jaw on the floor. This is after I think at this moment he's riding the bus back from his first visit to the kink club and not feeling good about himself. And he's on the bus, and let's see here. It's not time to think. It's not time to think about anything that's just happened. Nothing in the past 4 hours exists. I slump into a seat 3 rows from the back. A single half-empty Lucozade bottle rolls around the floor. It's the most I've connected to anything during this entire night. No one wants it. No one needs it. It might have been needed at one point and served someone half well enough, but not fully well enough. Discarded on the ground now, drained, and there's still something left in there, waiting for somebody to pick it up and drink it. You can't drink it. You can't drink it. Imagine what everyone would think if you drank it. You don't know where it's been, but you always hear it, don't you? The rattling of plastic on the metal floor as you move from one place to the next, swinging wildly left and right, trying to find any person to touch, connect with it. It belongs here as a nuisance. A required nuisance that everyone doesn't need, but needs. Ignore it like the others. Don't think about how it's here beneath you on the floor. And you're not going to be the one to pick it up, are you? Good. Every bus has a half-empty bottle on the floor. That's how it works in the UK. Maybe that's my gender. Blue, room temperature, bus Lucozade.
Oh.
And that was, I thought, like a couple of paragraphs that like blew me away. Mm-hmm. And it continued to return to that like as a motif a couple of times throughout the story. And I was like, it nailed it, man. There's just like, it's just full of like little great turns of phrase. There's a moment where he's talking about, realizing that he was interested in latex. Very funny anecdote about how he realized he was into latex when watching the scene in The Incredibles where Mr. Incredible gets like trapped in those weird black goo bubbles.
Oh yeah.
I was like, yes, I remember
like
that scene
tar
too.
pit goo bubbles that they can't move out. Yeah.
And there's a moment where he says like, it was a few more years before I realized what this was, but this was a dormant realization, drowned out by the unrealized loathing of being a woman. After I transitioned enough to be aware of my sick perversions, realizing that I was both the fish in the aquarium and the one tapping the glass, it was time to break into the evergreen and formative world of university. And I was like, realizing I was both the fish in the aquarium and the one tapping the glass. Like, I loved that sentence, man. This is full of stuff like that. It's a really well-written story. And the characters are fun, and there's some really good funny moments as well. Don't get me wrong. It's not like, this is not like a, language wank or something. This is full of funny online language as well, and just it's very well written. I just took a couple screenshots of bits like that because I thought, man, they're nailing it on some of this stuff. So anyway, I don't know anything about, the body and the blood. I don't know if that's two people working together. Is the body one person and the blood another? Is the body and the blood a single individual? I couldn't figure out whether this person had, I probably should have done more research. I don't know anything about the body and the blood, so apologies there. But they're onto something here. This is really great. It's a really great one of these. So if you're interested in a trans narrative, a story about, finding yourself, decoupling yourself from bad online, it's just a really, really good story and really well written. And it apparently has 2 endings. I got an ending I was quite happy with. It has a very minimal amount of choice. Occasionally you get things like dialogue choices, but spend the time on this one if you can. I think it's great.
If it makes you feel better, they don't have any other games listed on Interactive Fiction Database. So they might be, they might have other games, but not listed there. So.
Well, one last quick thing. Because this is such a long game, you're going to want to make sure you're playing on something that will save your progress. If you play the version that's linked from the comp page, that doesn't seem to have progress saving. But if you notice on the comp page, it does have a URL for a quicker loading / offline build that's hosted on itch.io. I just loaded up the itch.io page in Chrome and hit play on there, and it worked perfectly, and the saving also worked perfectly even between sessions and across a couple of days. So I would definitely recommend play that rather than clicking the play online link on the comp page.
Nice. And one more note, the fiction database also says it was written in ink, which is
that makes sense because it says Ink Runner in the title bar. So hey, cool. Nice. I'm always glad to hear that that's getting some use because
big fan of Inkle here. Yes.
Big fan. And and one last little note I wanted to say is I loved the fact that if you go on the comp page, this has a walkthrough link. Many of the games will have a link on the comp page to a walkthrough. But if you click it here, it just goes to a text file that just says, "We didn't get help, so neither do you."
Ouch.
I know. So that's Sextuple L.
Well, speaking of games that don't give you any help, I did play the latest Arthur DiBianca joint, as is my...
Laura, I'm so glad that you fell on this sword instead of me. Once again, our tradition.
It's not a sword for me. That's the thing. I'm like, so for those who have not been listening to 10 years of IFComp coverage, because I think I fall into this beautiful trap every year, Arthur DiBianca tends to write puzzle box games, and they usually have some kind of specific innovation, something to play with, something very narrow or something very broad. Like there's been magic wands, there's been math games, there's been lots of different ways to do puzzles in a parser. And this year, he said, for the duration of the competition, just email me for hints.
So did you?
I didn't, because that to me was a sign. And again, it says don't be shy. Hint requests are welcome. Just click the little envelope at the top of the entry. Very much a please ask for hints. But usually, if I was at the point that I wanted to send an email, I just went to bed. And I woke up and was smarter magically, because that's how puzzles work. Mm-hmm. So I never had to send the email because I was like, I'll write this, but I think if I just sleep, I'll be fine. And lo and behold, sleep was the hint system that I needed. Please use hints. I am not above hints, but for me, that tended to solve it. But anyway, the name of the game is a very strong gland, and you're abducted by aliens, and you show up in a gormless room with nothing in it. And then some things appear. And after a little bit of time where you don't understand the language, they talk to you and say, hi, we're testing your intelligence gland. That's the gland, is your brain. But the trick here is every command is just, they say it's single keystroke, but it's even more than that. You just type X for examine, T for touch, and the first letter of the thing you want to use. And then you can hit Z to wait. And that's everything you can do in the game. You can examine and touch stuff and wait. End of story.
And how does that do anything?
So, first of all, I'll say that in the beginning of the game, the speed of this makes it feel like the aliens are psychic. It actually works thematically for it to be this fast. Because you hit X and it types the word examine for you. You hit the first letter of the thing you're looking at, B for bird, and the word bird will appear. So it makes you feel like you are, it's using a text expander, but it feels very magical. And the way it actually works puzzle-wise is the environment in the room changes. MathBrush said in their review that they called it cycles. I think that's very appropriate. Sometimes things have a pattern, and you need to watch for the pattern and figure out the combination of when to do what action and when to wait. Sometimes things are much more just paying attention and like stepping outside yourself, and you see the way to cut the Gordian knot. But it's a bunch of puzzles that are as limited as humanly possible. And it seems like some people are very frustrated with this because they're like, I'm waiting all the time. And other people thought, well, this is delightful. What fun it is. I felt kind of in the middle. Most of the puzzles are super fun. And they feel annoying until you get it, and then you feel smart. Some of them I was like, oh, I see what you're doing here, and I'm annoyed I have to wait. Like, just as I get annoyed in video games, because the hard part for me is solving the puzzle, not the execution. So once I know the answer to a puzzle, I feel in my soul that I should be able to just solve it immediately and move on to the next one, because I am impatient once I feel like I'm right. It wasn't that long of a wait, but I can see why people got frustrated, because sometimes you do have to wait to execute. And if you hit the wrong button or you do the wrong presses, you touch the wrong thing in the wrong order, you can reset and really mess it up. But I will say at some point, of course, the aliens who want to examine you want your help because you're so smart. But I think any more than that, this is an unspoilable game to me, unless I talk about how the puzzles work. Like all the other DiBianca joints, I think the coolest thing to me was how responsive the text expander bits feel, because that's what feels good about this. It's knowing the puzzle, hitting 4 keys, and it's over, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. I don't actually know how hard these puzzles are. Like, because a lot of the other ones are word or linguistics puzzles, or they're math puzzles, and this had much more pattern puzzles percentage-wise. So I won't say what percentage of what kind of puzzles there are in here, because there's a mix, but a lot of them are pattern recognition. So if that's your kind of puzzle game, here you go. There's a whole bunch of them. I then played a bunch of other games that weren't puzzle parsers because I wanted to have something else to talk about. And the first one was Bad Beer by Vivian Dunstan. And I'd never played a game by Vivian before. Doing a little research, seems like their bag's mostly historical. This is not necessarily historical. You show up at a pub and the beer is bad. And you wander around until you get enough clues to know the beer is bad because of a ghost.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then the ghost is like, oh, you can see me, you know who I am. You should, spoiler here for a 30-minute game, but you should go solve my murder, basically. It's not a murder. There's an accident. And can you prevent it? And that's it. It's about half an hour, but it is very much a little like observe. It's all about the vibe. There's a lot of reading and a lot of content and a lot of language here for the length, which is quite fast. It said an hour. I don't think this game is more than 30 minutes. I think it's more like 15 if you're a fast reader, or if you move through the hint, like if you're moving around fast enough. It is a game where there's not a lot of stuff to examine. It wants you to move through the pub and look at a lot of different rooms, and it's very clear what you're supposed to look at. Like, hi, you're in a room and there's 2 things, and one is a bed, and there's something on the bed. You examine the bed. It's just an example, but it's very directional about what you're supposed to do. It wants you to have a vibe of the what the whole thing feels like. And, if you like a little bit of a spook, this is a nice, very light spook story. I got the bad ending because at the second time I looped, the ghost was like, you have one more chance to solve my death. And I was like, oh, I didn't take notes last time because I thought I'd have forever to play it. And I play games for short game where I do a lot of messing around the first playthrough to see what happens. And then I try to actually solve it. So I basically had one turn to solve it. I went in the wrong direction because I didn't draw a map and got the bad ending. So don't be me and know which direction is the kitchen and which direction is the stairs when you're in the pub, because they don't remind you in the final puzzle. And if you don't write it down, you'll get the bad ending.
Bad beer.
Bad beer. It's cute. I really liked it. I think this is just the right kind of short game you can do to get a sense of what's in the comp. Like, it is well written, it is quick, it is not going to tax your brain, but it is going to be a little bit moving. And I like those. I always want one or two of those in my mix. And one more, completely different. I did the birding game.
I saw this on the list, and I was desperate to know if it was hiding some strange depths, because every year we end up seeing some game that's like, this is a terminal for, doing inventory on valves. And you open it up and you do some inventory on valves, and eventually you find out the valves are people or aliens, and
that cross-country trucking game in Canada that was actually trying to teach you geography the whole time.
Or you get the edutainment game about Canadian trucking, where we looked for ages to see what the twist was,
and there was no nothing. Twist. It was just
there to learn about Canadian trucking. So which is that? Which is this? Is this a like learn about birding, or are the birds killers or something?
This is legit a interactive fiction walking simulator about birding in a park near your house.
Cool. Yes. Love it. Please expand.
So, context. I live in walking distance of Prospect Park in New York City, which my husband would say is the superior park to Central Park, because when you're in it, you can't see buildings, but that's his prejudice. He likes being immersed in a park. Prospect Park is like the place for birders in the area, because there's not a lot of parks and all the birds go to the green space. But I have not managed to get up and attend one birding meetup, because they meet at 8 a.m. on the other side of the park. And I have yet to wake up on time to walk to the other side of the park by 8. So this game starts and said, you wake up at 7:30 and are like, it's a good time to go birding. I was like, this has never happened to me before.
Power fantasies, man. That's what video games are all about.
I was like, this is
living a life you could never experience yourself.
I mean, I did buy binoculars. I do enjoy, I have friends who are birders. But the problem is I'm always birding at noon or 5 p.m. when there's a ton of people in the park and the birds are either sleeping or like getting the hell away from everyone eating lunch. So I've seen some beautiful birds. There was a bald eagle, but I was excited to experience
bald eagle in New York City.
Yeah, it nested in the park. And wow. I went out and visited that bald eagle every day until it left. I was like, me and my newfound binoculars. Like, it was pretty cool. Also, when I reported it in the bird app, which is featured in this game, because you also open up the bird app and the hotspot finder, which I'd never seen before. And I was like, oh, this is legit telling you, like, this is a map of the park you're in. This is a link to the Cornell Labs eBird tracker. And this is a link to the software where you can report birds in the park. And I was like, oh, they're super birding simulating. Like, and he wants you to know this is the tools if you want to do this. I've never used the checklist tool, but when I reported that bald eagle, the number of buttons I had to press to be like, yes, this is legitimately a bald eagle. I'm not lying. They're like, you probably didn't see a bald eagle. Could you please confirm you did? I was like, there is a very professional man next to me who is leading a tour group with the bald eagle. Like, please accept me, Cornell. Anyway, back to this game. You get out of your car, you're walking around, and you get a picture of everywhere you're going. So you get a picture of the sign for the park. You get a picture of the parking lot. You get a picture of the soccer field you're walking past. You get a picture of the road. And like literally this person went out with their camera, parked their car, and was like, go left, Picture. Go right. Picture. It is a legit a map of Popeblick Park. This game is called Birding in Popeblick Park, and it is just walking around the park and birding. And you're in a soccer field. Here's a picture of the soccer field. You can click on a link to look at the top of the soccer nets or like look at the ground. And when you click those buttons, you might see a bird and a picture of a bird pops up. And it describes to you the bird and how you identify it. Like one of the best ones was like you look at a tree and there's a bird who is walking upside down on the tree. And it's like, of course, only 3 birds can do this. And only one is native to Kentucky. and has a plumage that will blend in with the wood. So you know it is this specific bird. I was like, wow, this is how it works. If you're good at this, I identify the same 5 birds every week. I'm a bad birder. I'm like, it's a starling. It's a house wren. Like it's always the same 5 birds. There are many more than that though. And you click it and you put a little spreadsheet. It fills in like 3 eastern starlings or like 1 thrush in a little chart. And when you're done wandering, you can choose a couple times to go back to your car or you can keep wandering around. It'll give you a little table of all the birds you saw. And then a picture of the man who made the app who is like, I love birding. I hope you do too. I hope you learned something. Here's a picture of me in my park. And honestly, I knew I would have an emotional day at work because I was presenting some like crisis and emergency support guidance, which is a pretty heavy topic. And then I stopped work and I played this birding game. And I was like, rather than go to the park outside and birding, I played this game. And it was very lovely. I don't think I'm going to wake up at 7:30 tomorrow, probably because it's almost 11 p.m. and that seems like a bad idea to go see birds, but I could. This game kind of makes me want to. It's very gentle. You want to play if you want to play a walking sim of birding, like go no further. Birding in Popeblick Creek. Kentucky seems gorgeous.
Yeah, see, it sounds great. You know, I love that there's room for such a variety of things in the comp. And this is that kind of thing where like, man, somebody just wanted to share their love of birding and they did it through an interactive tool that they created and tells you a little bit about what it's like to go birding. And maybe someone will play this and decide that they want to do it in real life. And I think that's a cool and beautiful thing. So yeah. I'm glad to hear it.
I'll give one warning. Someone in our Discord did say that if you play this on a phone or a iPad, it can get a little weird because the pictures are incredibly high resolution. I played on desktop and had no problem, but the pictures are quite large. And if you're having display issues, just use another device.
Well, that's what you want with a bird game. You want to be able to zoom in on the plumage. So makes sense.
Exactly. It's beautiful.
I have just one other game to talk about because like I mentioned, like, you know, I kind of budget a certain amount of time for playing games and I spent almost all of it playing Latex, Leather, Lipstick, Love, Lust. But the next thing on my list that I really wanted to play was The Den by Ben Jackson, which just from the description sounded really cool. I haven't completed it yet. So this is a recommendation based basically on what I think might be close to the first half of the game, but I'm not actually all the way in yet. And also based on the description, I suspect there are twists that might transform the setting or experience in ways that I don't expect. We'll see. Well, I don't know. But I do think this game is really, really well implemented and has a good premise and has been a lot of fun to play so far. So The Den by Ben Jackson. Here's the quick description from the comp page. It says, V and Aiden have spent their entire lives in a place they call The Den. Father looks after them and protects them from the outside world. They have never thought about leaving until something happens that makes them question everything they thought they knew. And the description bullet points include a lighthearted adventure with a darker mystery, play as both characters to uncover the secrets of the den, hack computers, solve puzzles, and help them work together as a team. If you think you know the story, think again. Which is why I think, like, I think I know the story. Maybe I'd better think again. I'm only about halfway through. What I really like about this one, this is a all choice-based game. I believe it's built using Twine, but it is very gamey in a sense. The sense is that it has like, it has like a full saving system. It has like rooms and navigation, and it's straddling that line between. It's not a parser game, but it's like certainly more parser-y than most Twine games I've played. And it has a really interesting setting. I just described it there, but like what I really like about this is that you are constantly switching between the two main characters, V and Aiden, and interacting between them in interesting ways. So like, for example, so you're in this, underground complex. Father is this creepy, he's not present in the part of the game that I've been currently playing, as apart from sort of like being like a looming presence, but Father is absent. Now we have and there's been some sort of accident or earthquake or something. Now we have time to unobserved explore some things that have been mysterious to us in the past. And V and Aiden kind of split up and climbs through some little crack in a wall and explores some rooms that they didn't know were there, despite the fact that they've been living in this underground bunker for their entire lives. And these rooms feel decrepit. Everything's dusty. There are these old computers that have, weird broken aspects to them, but almost every room has a computer. And this is one of the cool things about the game is that any computer you can go to, you can communicate with each other when they're both at a computer. So like if you can navigate them both to a computer, then they can have conversations with each other and share news between them. But you can switch places between them at any time. So you can decide, okay, I'm going to go control Aiden. I'm going to have him go, reactivate the elevator. I'm going to go over to V and have her hack a computer and figure out how to deactivate the fan so that somebody can crawl through a vent, that kind of thing. And each one is able to do things to help advance the other one's story, and you can switch back and forth between them at any time. And that aspect of it was like super well implemented. It introduces that like very lightly, like at first they're together and then they're split up, but you're kind of scripted as to which one you're controlling. And then finally, once it lets you like have it, and now you can switch freely between the two characters. You've got a feel for it. It introduces that gameplay aspect really, really well. Also, this is a game that I think is doing a really good job. Like, this could easily have been a parser game, but I think it would have been harder to play. Like you're in this complex with multiple floors and different rooms within those, and obviously they're navigating around between them. But like this is not a game about like learning the map or like what rooms are connected to what. It doesn't really matter. So being able to select things from a menu here makes this feel a little faster and a little less frustrating. And I really appreciated that, especially considering you're having to manage the location of two different characters simultaneously, which would have been, I think, kind of hard in a parser. And furthermore, it also keeps a kind of a checklist, like certain elements of the game, like, if you're in a room and there's like 7 things to interact with, all of those are a list of links. And if you click on them, you have a thing that you can interact with, and then it'll put a check mark next to one of them showing like, hey, you've already interacted with this. You've already seen whatever it is there is to see with this, or, it'll put little emojis on there, like lock emojis and things like that to indicate things about these links, to tell you like what you've already interacted with, or, what's currently available for you to do. So really well implemented in that way. I was having a lot of fun with it. And I can't wait to discover what's going on here. It's very mysterious. And, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the kind of things that you expect in we've always lived in the bunker. Father is a mysterious figure. Like, you're trying to investigate why you're here, what's happening in the world outside, which exists, but it's, you've never seen it. There were people here before you, and you start to learn a little bit about them. One of the funny things, though, about this is that a lot of the action has to do with like finding a way into a new space, finding the computer in that new space, and figuring out how to unlock features of the computer to use that to control things in your environment, usually to then allow the other character to progress. And one of the things I thought was very funny about this is that essentially the hacking is they've re-implemented Wordle here.
Oh, okay.
the hacking will be things like, you discover a special debug code you can put into the computers to get into a mode where you can then decrypt them. And the decryption key is, of course, a 5-letter word. And it gives you a list of like 55-letter words to choose from. And it's going to be one of those. And you basically play Wordle to figure out how to decrypt the workstation. And then you could use that to get into menus to do things like
BioShock's just pipe puzzles, and like all the Spider-Man stuff was all just logic puzzles. Like, I'm going to open up my iPad and do work in my lab. And it's just like a puzzle that you could have gotten in a book from 1980. So like, I'm okay with a Wordle puzzle.
Oh yeah, totally valid. And for a text-based game, if you're going to implement like a hacking mini game, Wordle is a perfect solution
choice
for that.
Yeah,
it works perfectly. I love it.
Feels fresher than, again, another pipe puzzle.
Exactly. So I thought that was really, really well done. I can't wait to play more of it. Again, like I said, I think I've played less than half of it. Spent about an hour with it. I think this is probably about a 2-hour game. I don't know for sure. But I can already say that I recommend it. And I'm going to be finishing it, definitely voting on it. Probably pretty high. I think this is, a really good little adventure. I don't think the characters are super deep yet or anything, but hey, that's not their fault. They've been in a bunker their whole lives. What are they going to say? So I'm looking forward to playing more of it. Oh. That's The Den by Ben Johnson.
I do want to pop in and say, since we were talking about puzzles, that I haven't played as many days as I'd like of the Apothecary's Assistant, which is the game that you're supposed to go to work 5 days and 5 days of real time. But I think it continues to be a really nice thing to pop into. The puzzles continue to be very light, accessible, and I think there's like days of the week events as well. Like I think there are things that happen on Mondays in the calendar and things like I think there's actually a lot more here. I didn't look in for a couple days and they actually seem to be like, oh, hey, cool, you're here. You haven't been here in a few days. It does seem to have a lot more beneath the hood. So this is probably something that we all might want to pop in and see what different things happen depending on what days we arrive. It feels kind of advent calendar-y almost. So I don't feel like it's, once again, not ready for a full review. I haven't played 5 days, but I think there's a lot there. So if you're curious about what a real-time IF game feels like, join me in playing the Apothecary's Assistant.
Cool. Is this a first for like I can't recall any game like in the comp?
No.
That's it's got to be. I mean, it's clearly like that's not a first for that mechanic. I mean, everything from Animal Crossing on down has done that a little bit, but it's definitely unusual to see that in the comp. So that's really cool.
It feels very. Again, it's a light bite per day. I don't think it's more than nothing. So far has been more than 5-10 minutes. So I don't think overall it's going to take that much of my time, but it's little snacks. It feels nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I hope that doesn't deter folks from voting on it. I know that, folks, the whole idea is, vote after about 2 hours.
I would feel fair voting on it now if I needed to. If I was at the border, I would still rate it given how long I've played, because I think I've played enough to know there's a lot there. But I know I have time before the end of the comp. So I want to finish it and give a fuller review here. But if you play it 2 days before ratings, you should still rate it.
Yeah. I guess I was going to really briefly mention the one other game that I played or managed to fit in was You Can't Save Her by Sarah Mack. We already talked about it. Nate talked about it on our last episode. And so I won't do like a full review or anything here, but I'll just say that I basically co-signed his review. I think it was good. It is very porpentine-y and it's, it wears it on sleeve. It acknowledges it's based in part on some elements from some of her games or, draws inspiration from them. But I thought it was really good. And I mean, I love that style. I love her work. I loved this game. So You Can't Save Her by Sarah Mack. Recommended as well. And a really nice thing about that one is it is literally like a 15-20 minute experience. So absolutely. Probably the best. I mean, okay, I say this having played very few of the 15-20 minutes games, but I think it's a strong 15-20 minute game. One of the better 15-20 minute games I've played in a while. So definitely recommend it for folks who are looking for something very brief with a little bit more meat on its bones.
That's a very good choice for when you're not at the 5 game rating threshold and you need to just get one more in.
Just give it a quick play, add it to your list. So listeners, we continue to cover IFComp 2024. We will be doing so until the end of the comp. As always, we need your help. IFComp is a complicated thing to cover. There are many games. There's no way for all of us, even among the four of us, there's no way for us to touch on everything or really everything, even just everything very interesting. So what we really need from you is if you play something in the comp, we really love it when folks play along with us in the comp, do their own voting, play the games. It's a great experience. If you've never done IFComp, give it a try. It's great. But if you do play some games and you think something is interesting, or even if you just want to tell us, hey, this game was definitely not interesting and here's why, we love to hear that stuff because it helps us plan our coverage and decide what to play. And it's super helpful. Like I said earlier, latex, leather, etc., was not something I was planning on playing until some comments in the Discord maybe made me give it a second look, and I'm so glad I did. So you can tell us what you're playing either via the website. There is a contact form on our website. You can find us at shortgame.fm. All the stuff is there. Sure. There's also, of course, our Discord, which is a way better than the Discord in the game that I played. It's a lovely,
healthier space.
Very much so. And so if you'd like to join us there, if you need to escape from a bad Discord, maybe, then you can do that by joining our Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame, or go to shortgame.fm, and there's links there. We would love to have you. The Discord is really the heart and soul of the show. The folks that are on there are giving us tips about things. The biggest thing that's happening right now is a lot of folks are playing UFO 50, which is sadly a little too, there's 50 games. It's not a short.
We could cover it if we were like, each one of these is a game.
We could cover any game in UFO 50, but I feel like that task has already been taken on.
A lot of people are covering it. I think we might play it anyway, maybe a special episode, but I don't think it's... You're right.
We'll
it's
see.
not me.
There's
a lot of games we haven't covered this year, so...
We've got a lot to do. Eggplant, another great show, is doing a year of UFO 50. I almost wish we had come up with this idea and done it, stolen it. It's such a good idea. They are doing UFO 50, one game a week for an entire year, and they're not covering anything else all year. Can you imagine, Laura? Can you imagine knowing what we were going to cover for an entire year in advance? Can you imagine how much that would streamline our lives? I'm kind of jealous. It wouldn't. It would ruin our podcast, or at least in some ways. But God, I'm a little jealous. What a great idea! And I'm going to be following along on that. So listeners, check them out too. They're a great podcast. But whatever you do, make sure you stay subscribed to The Short Game. This is the real shit. All right. But yeah, we might talk about UFO 50, but I'll leave it here. Listeners, once again, thank you so much for joining us on The Short Game. I've been Raygan Kelly.
I've been Laura Nash.
And join us next week on another episode of The Short Game.